I studied the case of People versus Juan Corona, also known as the machete killer or the homophobic serial killer. Juan Corona was born in Mexico in 1934 and traveled to the United States in 1950. Although Corona had no formal education, he had a rather high IQ of 130, which is common in serial killers, especially serial killers who perform organized killings, as Juan Corona did. Corona had a history of mental illness, which came to the attention of his family members after a large storm hit the Yuba City area. It made him delirious and made him believe that everyone had died in the storm, which at that time he started to read the Bible, and that's when his family says that he really went off the deep end. Corona was respected and seemingly happily married with children. However, he was a schizophrenic and a sexual sadist who turned to murder in the spring of 1971. The largest homosexual serial killing until Gacy, Juan Corona sexually molested and murdered 25 migrant farm workers. The profile of Juan Corona's victims, most of them were aged 40 to 68, and they were social dropouts. They were, some of them, passing through the Yuba City area, and some of them were bums. Juan Corona chose the victims he did because he felt like people wouldn't miss them if he chose the social dropouts. So the question that I ask is whether Corona is a homophobic serial killer or if he's a homosexual serial killer. Homophobic is when an individual is afraid or doesn't like homosexual individuals. And homosexual means that someone is attracted to the same sex. There were meat receipts found in the victims' pockets which had Corona's names on them. Also, Bank of America deposit slips with Juan Corona's name and address on them. Each of the victims was seen with Corona at least once, and he supplied workers to the places where the bodies of his victims were found. What linked Corona to the murders, according to sheriff's deputies, is the fact that his older brother, Natividad, it's a stepbrother, he had committed a murder earlier. It was approximately a year before. He, also a known homosexual, he killed a guy in the bathroom of his cafe. So police believed that he had that Corona, referring to he, had something to do with the murders. And he did. The victims were found in an orchard, later referred to as Graveyard Lane. They each had their pants pulled down, or no pants at all, shirts pulled over their head, and the coroner and sheriff's deputies believed that the victims were sodomized or sexually molested. However, at that time in 1971, there was no DNA testing, therefore they couldn't be tested to see if it was in fact Corona that did that to them. Some of the victims were also found with pornography in their pockets, which suggested that they were also homosexuals. Whether or not that was planted, it's unknown. It's just speculated at this point. Corona planned his murders in advance. He dug the graves days before he had the victims, or before he had known who the victims were going to be. The sheriff's deputies found 2 blood-stained knives in his home, also a ledger with some of the victims' names on them, some of the victims that were found murdered. They found a pistol, which was used in at least one of the killings, and blood-stained clothes. In regard to the jury, I read the jury which is an amazing book. It basically covers what the jury went through in coming to a verdict. Their main issue was the fact that they didn't understand the judge's instructions, but they did end up coming to a verdict of guilty on each 25 counts of murder. It took them 45 hours, though. Corona did appeal his case because he felt like his defense team did not represent him good enough, but the appeal was denied. He's now in Corcoran Prison in California.